Hey guys! Tonight we wander through the sun-warmed streets of ancient Rome, long before neon lights or Instagram stories existed. You probably won't survive this without a little awe, or at least a twinge of sensory overload, as merchants shout, carts rattle over cobblestones, and the smell of fresh bread mingles with, well, let's say less appetizing aromas drifting from nearby tanneries. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, post your location and local time in the comments. Let's see where in the world this evening's journey finds you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge along a narrow street in the Forum, toes crunching over uneven stones smoothed by centuries of sandals and boots. The morning sun casts long shadows of pillars and arches, highlighting the carved faces of gods who've silently watched the city wake. Merchants wave trinkets and textiles in your face, each more colorful than the last, and you feel that electric anticipation of a city alive with movement. Statues of emperors glare down at you from raised plinths, the marble catching light like a smug spectator at your small adventure. A vendor hawks bread so fragrant it nearly pulls you into his stall, and you imagine the baker kneading dough hours before dawn, oblivious to the bustle he will create. On a side street, a curious sight arrests you. A man tending a cage of live dormice, his tiny charges squeaking like miniature clockwork toys. You blink. Someone else smears a paste made of crocodile dung across her arms, a protective sunscreen in Roman fashion, or at least that's what she swears. The air is thick with the mingling of scents, fresh bread, sweat, and the tang of fermented fish sauce wafting from another stall. You lean closer to inhale the aroma of spices piled in pyramids, colors as vibrant as any painter's palette. Somewhere a flute player tries to earn coins, competing with the raucous chatter and clanging metal. You feel like a pinball bouncing from one sensory delight to another. You pause beside a fountain, watching water shimmer across the sunlit marble. Some say it was once filled with water from distant aqueducts, a testament to Roman engineering marvels, feeding both body and pride. Historians still argue whether Romans typically began their day at dawn, rushing to business, or preferred a leisurely pace, lingering over breakfast or the first cup of watered wine. You lean back on the cool stone, letting the morning energy wash over you, noticing a woman balancing a basket on her head while calling out prices, her voice melodic, practiced, unstoppable. The streets hum with a rhythm of life both ancient and oddly familiar, and you can't help but grin at the little chaos, the organized mess that somehow works. Even the pigeons seem to know their roles, darting around statues and fountain edges, unaware of the curious human weaving between them. You wander farther, peering into narrow alleys where blacksmiths hammer and apprentices dash. The clang of iron echoes like a heartbeat, blending with the laughter of children playing games with sticks and stones. A street poet murmurs lines that might have come from Ovid himself, or maybe just recycled rhymes for coins. Nearby, a water carrier balances jugs on his shoulders, weaving past the bustling crowd. The scent of hot bread, incense from a temple, and dust mingles in the warm air. The crocodile dung sunscreen woman passes again, laughing with a friend at some private joke. Life flows around you. The chatter, the footsteps, the occasional squawk of geese, all forming the city's rhythm. Birds circle overhead like tiny guardians, and a slave sweeps the street quietly. You feel a strange kinship with this ancient city, as if its pulse syncs with your own, full of purpose, habit, and small eccentricities. Sunlight glints off mosaics and bronze, silver and glass, dazzling the eyes. A patrician strolls by with a scroll, scribes trailing behind, and you wonder what occupies their morning while the streets hum with ordinary life. You tiptoe along invisible lines of class and privilege, observing and inhaling the city's energy. Rome breathes with you now, each sight, sound, and scent a small tessera in its grand mosaic. The streets are alive, orderly chaos blending with everyday routines, leaving you both anonymous and intimately connected. You leave the forum behind and drift into the heart of the bustling marketplace, where every corner bursts with color, scent, and sound. The sun filters through canvas awnings, creating dappled patterns on the ground that dance around your feet. You trudge past wooden stalls piled high with spices from far-off lands, their scents so pungent you can almost taste them before you buy. Cinnamon, cumin, and pepper mingle with the unmistakable aroma of freshly caught fish, some still glistening with seawater. Street children dart between your legs, laughing and shouting in a cacophony that somehow harmonizes with the brassy clangs of metalworkers hammering away in nearby alleyways. You inhale deeply, letting the marketplace soak into your skin, your hair carrying faint hints of salt, honey, and the dust of cobbled streets. A man waves a small vial of fermented fish sauce at you, beckoning with exaggerated gestures. You wrinkle your nose. The Romans call it garum, a staple seasoning, but to modern senses, it's something between perfume and old sock. You pass a stall selling honey-glazed dormice, tiny, delicate morsels skewered on sticks, and pause, watching locals bite in without hesitation. Somewhere else, a woman sells strange, iridescent shells she claims were gathered from the bottom of the Mediterranean. You glance around, spotting a vendor who has set up a rudimentary puppet theater for children, a monkey in a tiny tunic juggling coins as kids squeal in delight. Oddities like these pepper the everyday life of the market, and you realize that you are part of a spectacle just by walking through it. Historians still argue whether Roman marketplaces were primarily functional centers of trade or social arenas where citizens flaunted status, exchanged gossip, and tested wit. You notice it firsthand. A senator's freedman haggles loudly with a spice merchant, drawing attention from a nearby baker balancing loaves on his head. You dodge a goat tethered to a post, its owner muttering about mischief while pocketing coins from amused tourists of the era, people like you just trying to navigate the sensory overload. A water seller moves along, carrying heavy amphorae, calling out in a rhythm that almost becomes musical if you listen long enough. You follow the flow of people, letting yourself be swept along, occasionally pausing to watch the minor dramas unfold. A stolen fig here, a shouted insult there, small moments that define daily life in Rome just as much as grand triumphs. The marketplace smells are a mix of sweet, sour, and savory, often blending in ways your modern nose struggles to categorize. You stop beside a stall that specializes in oddities, small jars of dried lizard, bronze figurines, and amulets etched with symbols that promise health, wealth, or love. The vendor winks. You leave the bustling marketplace behind and wander into quieter streets where sunlight glints off temple columns and the scent of incense drifts lazily through the air. Each step on the cobblestones feels deliberate, almost ceremonial, as if the city itself wants you to notice the rhythm of its sacred spaces. You pause to watch smoke curl from a bronze brazier, the aroma of burning frankincense blending with distant hints of bread from a nearby bakery. Marble steps lead up to a temple entrance where priests in flowing tunics move with quiet purpose. You feel a strange reverence, even though part of you wonders whether anyone else walking these streets is paying much attention to the divine, or if it's just another background soundtrack to daily life. A poet recites verses in the forum, his voice rising and falling like a gentle tide, and beside him a monkey juggles coins tossed by amused children. You laugh softly, imagining the monkey's tiny tunic flapping with each toss. Nearby, a group of merchants argue over the price of a bronze statuette, gesturing wildly and punctuating their debate with occasional bursts of laughter. You notice a woman carrying a basket of figs, balancing it so carefully that it seems almost ritualistic, and a man trailing behind her sweeps the street, humming a melody that doesn't quite fit with the clamor of the city. Roman life, you realize, thrives on these contrasts, sacred and profane, solemn and ridiculous, intentional and chaotic, all coexisting in a delicate balance. Historians still argue whether Roman religion was mainly sincere belief or more performative civic duty. You watch a ritual unfold, priests dipping palms into bowls of water, murmuring incantations, while worshippers toss coins and nod respectfully. You feel the weight of centuries pressing lightly on your shoulders, imagining how many before you stood in this exact space, performing their own small acts of devotion or curiosity. A cat scurries across the temple steps, ignoring the rituals, and you laugh again, thinking how much the city accommodates both humans and animals without ever slowing down. The streets themselves are a tapestry of stories. You pass a young boy balancing jugs of water, carefully avoiding puddles and stray livestock, and a baker sliding hot loaves from a clay oven, the scent of fresh bread mingling with the smoke of incense. A poet moves to a new corner, reciting lines that might be borrowed from Virgil or improvised entirely, while children imitate him with exaggerated gestures. Evening settles over the city, softening the hard edges of marble and cobblestone, turning sunlight into a honeyed glow that seems to drape itself over every rooftop. You find yourself at the entrance to a grand domus, its portico flanked by statues whose expressions are frozen in eternal judgment or amusement, you can't quite decide. A servant opens the door before you can knock, ushering you into a courtyard alive with the warm hum of conversation and clinking cups. You notice the intricate mosaic underfoot depicting a hunting scene, colors muted yet vibrant under the flickering oil lamps. The scent of roasted meats, exotic spices, and fresh bread washes over you. It's overwhelming in the best way, a feast for all senses, promising indulgence and curiosity in equal measure. You recline on a low couch, the cushions soft beneath you, and watch as servants glide from tray to tray, pouring wine and offering small plates of olives, bread, and honeyed treats. The host gestures enthusiastically, introducing you to other guests whose names and titles are lost on you, yet whose gestures and smiles communicate friendliness, perhaps even mischief. A dish arrives that surprises you: roasted dormice, glazed with honey and garnished with herbs you can't quite identify. You try to suppress a laugh, again, dormice, but the Romans seem unfazed, even delighted. Somewhere across the room, a small bronze pipe plays a melody that blends with laughter and conversation, a soundtrack to a world simultaneously familiar and utterly foreign. Historians still argue whether most Roman dinners included genuine conversation or were performances designed to impress guests. You watch attentively. A poet recites an ode, while a musician plucks at a lyre, and everyone claps at appropriate intervals, smiles practiced but warm. You notice the subtle signals of hierarchy, gestures, seating arrangements, who receives the finest wine first, and imagine the countless hours of subtle negotiation, unspoken rules, and fleeting glances that shape this social choreography. Despite the formality, the atmosphere is inviting. The clatter of plates, the soft murmur of wine and goblets, and the occasional burst of laughter make the domus feel alive in a way that is equal parts intimidating and enchanting. Curious culinary choices abound. You nibble on a plate of garum-drizzled fish, savor the complexity of spices that seem almost too bold for modern palates, and peek at a small platter topped with an unfamiliar feathered dish, more decoration than nourishment. Someone whispers a joke about. You drift into the quieter streets now, the bustle of daytime Rome replaced by the gentle hum of torches flickering along stone walls. The air is cooled, carrying hints of olive oil, charred wood, and the faint tang of the Tiber River nearby. Each step echoes against the cobblestones, a muted percussion to the distant laughter of those still lingering at evening taverns or domus gatherings. Shadows stretch across arches and statues, transforming familiar faces into enigmatic shapes that seem to watch you with quiet curiosity. Somewhere, a cat winds around your ankles, sleek and silent, a tiny guardian of nocturnal secrets. You feel the city's pulse slow just enough to let you notice the subtleties: the rustle of leaves, the soft gurgle of a fountain, the distant clop of hooves from a messenger hurrying through empty streets. Odd nocturnal habits are everywhere if you know where to look. Night watchmen shout their rounds, sticks thumping against the stones, announcing both presence and authority. Vendors hastily pack up their stalls, muttering about tomorrow's market, while someone else sleeps sprawled under the base of a statue, using its pedestal as a makeshift bed. You pass a small temple where a lone priest tends a flickering oil lamp, murmuring prayers into the darkness, and you wonder if his words carry more weight tonight, when the city itself seems to be listening. Even the air seems alive. Scents of cooking, of damp earth, of incense drifting together like an olfactory lullaby. You inhale slowly, letting the complexity settle around you, feeling both part of and apart from this ancient rhythm. Historians still argue whether Romans believed dreams were divine messages or merely idle thoughts, and as you walk, you find yourself half wishing for a sign, half amused by the possibility that the night could deliver one. You pass doorways where lamps have dimmed to a faint glow, overhearing whispers or laughter, tiny fragments of lives continuing unseen. A group of youths plays quietly in a courtyard, balancing on low walls and making secret games of the dark, while the sound of a flute drifts from a distant window. Even in stillness, Rome is alive. Even in shadows, the city breathes. Your footsteps feel lighter, slower, attuned to the subtle cadence of nocturnal life, as if the city. Slowly, you let your pace ease even further,
feeling the tension of walking through crowded streets, bustling markets, and ornate domes melt away. The air around you softens, cooler now, and every scent, bread, olive oil, incense, fades into a gentle, almost imperceptible whisper. You notice the subtle rhythm of your own breathing, in sync with the distant trickle of fountains, the muted shuffle of feet, and the faint sigh of night air brushing over stone. Let your eyes soften, even if you're just imagining the scene, letting the mosaics, the statues, and the flickering lamps blur into calming patterns that float behind your eyelids. The oddities that once made you smile, the juggling monkeys, honeyed dormice, strange amulets, now seem like gentle companions, small threads connecting you to the life of the city. You are walking through Rome not as a visitor or historian, but as a quiet observer of a world both vivid and distant, aware yet undisturbed. Shadows stretch and fold, and the city's energy has slowed to a tender heartbeat, steady and comforting. You feel your body relax into the rhythm, softening muscles, letting shoulders drop, and releasing the tightness in your jaw. Dreams may come, whispers of gods, stories, or perhaps nothing at all. Let it all drift freely, unforced. The day, the evening, the markets, temples, and domes, they linger in memory like gentle ripples on water. You are safe, present, and softly cradled by the quiet pulse of ancient streets. One last breath, long and slow, and the city becomes a lullaby, the shadows a blanket, the moonlight a soft guide into rest.
Years pass almost quietly in this desert rhythm. Day after day, stone after stone, the structure rises higher until it dominates the horizon like a man-made mountain. Standing at the edge of the construction ground now, you can finally see the pyramid in its nearly complete form, towering above the Giza plateau with a presence that feels both powerful and strangely calm. The final phase of construction has begun. Workers carefully guide one of the last casing stones into position along the upper levels. Unlike the rough blocks beneath, these outer stones are cut from smooth white limestone, polished so finely that sunlight will one day reflect off the surface like a glowing beacon across the desert. A mainstream historical fact often mentioned is that the pyramid originally shone brilliantly under the Egyptian sun because of these polished casing stones. From miles away, travelers along the Nile could see it gleaming on the horizon. It must have looked almost unreal. You watch as ropes tighten and wooden levers lift the final blocks higher and higher along the ramps. The structure built for Khufu now reaches its intended height, about 146 meters when newly completed. Historians still argue whether a special ceremonial stone, the pyramidion, was placed at the very top during a final ritual. Some believe it may have been covered in gold or electrum, so it sparkled in the sunlight like the tip of a divine monument. Imagine that moment. Thousands of workers gather below while priests chant prayers to Ra. The final stone slides into place. The ramps will soon be dismantled, leaving the smooth geometric shape visible for the first time. After decades of effort, the pyramid stands complete. Inside, the burial chamber awaits its royal occupant. Corridors and chambers are sealed carefully, filled with objects meant to accompany the pharaoh into the afterlife: furniture, jewelry, ceremonial tools, and symbolic treasures. Historians still argue how many hidden spaces might remain undiscovered within the Great Pyramid of Giza. Even modern scans have revealed mysterious voids whose purposes remain unknown. So despite centuries of study, the pyramid still holds secrets. And then, the work crews slowly disappear.
The workers' village empties, the ovens cool, the noise of construction fades into the quiet desert wind. What remains is the monument itself, millions of stones arranged with astonishing precision. Standing beside it now, you realize something remarkable. This structure will outlive almost everything around it. Empires will rise and fall, cities will grow and vanish, languages will change, and thousands of years will pass. Yet the pyramid will remain here, watching the Nile flow quietly beside the desert. And tonight, as the wind softens and the stars brighten above the plateau, the monument rests in silence. The desert night grows calmer now. You step back from the towering stone and let your gaze drift across the quiet sands. The Nile glimmers faintly in the distance, moving just as it did thousands of years ago when the first workers arrived here with ropes and sledges. The air is cooler, the sky deeper, the stars stretching endlessly above the ancient landscape. Somewhere nearby, the massive pyramid stands exactly where it has stood for millennia, patient and unmoving. You imagine the thousands of hands that shaped it, the voices that once echoed across this plateau, the quiet determination of people who spent years building something they knew they would never see finished. And yet, they built it anyway. Now all that effort has settled into stillness. The desert wind brushes softly across the stone blocks, and the monument seems almost peaceful under the moonlight. No crowds, no noise, just the gentle hush of night wrapping around one of humanity's greatest creations. You breathe in slowly, letting the calm settle. The Nile keeps flowing, the stars keep turning overhead, and the pyramid, silent and steady, keeps its watch over the desert, just as it has for thousands of quiet nights like this one.